Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Dr. Seth Gillihan, who's here to share with us his new book, Mindful Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, A Simple Path to Healing, Hope, and Peace. So Seth is a licensed psychologist who specializes in mindful cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as CBT. He was a full-time faculty member at the University of Pennsylvania and taught in the psychology department at Haverford College. He has been in private practice since 2012 and completed a doctorate in psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. Seth Gillihan.
Thanks, Marianne. Looking forward to talking to you.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this new book. So what even inspired you to dive into this topic?
I'd written a couple books on cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And, in the couple of years leading up to this book, I'd really been needing the types of tools that I'd written about. I needed them myself. And, part of what I shared with people through the CBT work that I did would often include mindfulness, but I really found through my own struggles that I needed to really integrate mindfulness with cognitive behavioral therapy in a way that I found really elevated both approaches. So CBT seemed to make mindfulness seem to have advantages for practicing mindfulness, and in the other direction, mindfulness seemed to enhance CBT practice. So I found these things so helpful myself, and I really wanted to share them with other people.
Well, we're so glad that you are. It's such a great book. And for those who are new, why don't you share a little bit about what mindful cognitive therapy, what is it? What does it do?
Yeah. Well, it combines three treatment approaches that developed somewhat separately. So the cognitive approach, that's the way we think. So our thinking styles can often trip us up. So for example, let's say I'm going to give a talk to, let's say, a group at work, and I'm feeling anxious about that, I'm probably going to have thoughts like it's not going to go well, or they're going to be bored, or nobody wants to hear what I have to say. And those types of thoughts contribute to our unhelpful feelings and distressing feelings, and it can make us less effective at doing the things that we're doing. So we can take a look at those types of thoughts and change them and think more helpfully, more accurately, more adaptively. So that's the cognitive part. The behavioral pillar is just about doing activities that help to move us toward our goals. It sounds really simple, and the approach is, I think, very basic in a lot of ways. Like I sometimes tell people, I'm going to ask them to do some stupid and obvious things, but it's not just about telling people like, oh, you should exercise, or, oh, maybe you should, get more active so you can feel less depressed. But CBT really is about breaking down things that we need to do into manageable steps and finding tools that help us to make the changes that we need to. It's not just advice. That'd be kind of a lousy treatment of just like, oh, do more things that are good for you. Like, oh, great, thanks. I could have thought of that myself. But the cognitive and behavioral parts have been integrated already. And then other people have thought about how mindfulness and CBT fit together. But what I found is that when we're really present, when we're really in our lives as they are, which is really the core of mindfulness, and when we're opening to things as they are, rather than fighting against our reality or trying to wish away what's happening and say, it shouldn't be this way. But when we're in the moment and we're open to what's happening, that's a much more effective place to start from, to do anything from, to relate to another person, to work, to tend to our health. And it really enhances our cognitive techniques in CBT because it's easier to notice what we're thinking when we're actually present. It's easier to think more helpful thoughts when we're accepting things as they are. And it's easier to and more effective to do some of the behavioral work with more of that presence, with more of that acceptance. Like if I need to face my fears as part of my treatment, it helps a lot to be open to the fact that I'm going to feel uncomfortable as I do it. So that's what mindful CBT really is about, is pulling those three together.
Well, thank you for going through and explaining that. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's so many people right now that are suffering from depression, anxiety, I mean, you name it. And I'm sure that repetitive thought process, and typically it's negative, is something that we all have to get to a point of mastering.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think all of us, I think it's a lot of the things that I think about and write about, I think are fairly universal struggles that we have that just tend to be a part of the human condition. And they vary from person to person, but I think dealing with our thoughts and catching our unhelpful stories that we're telling ourselves and thinking, more in more accurate and useful ways, I think that's really kind of a task for a lifetime. I think we keep practicing. I don't think it's anything that we ever fully arrive at, like, now I only think good thoughts. I don't think that's realistic. And I don't want a person to feel like if they're continuing to struggle with their thoughts, like, I must be doing something wrong, or, I'm not like those people who are able to just have, helpful, positive thoughts that lead them toward their goals and make them these highly effective people. But I think it's an ongoing challenge. I did find, I have to tell you, Marianne, through this illness that I've dealt with for the past few years, which was a lot of what prompted me to develop these ideas and these practices and to write this book, I have found that it's a lot easier to relate to other people's pain. I mean, not that I couldn't in the past, but it's different when it's more personal and when it's something that you've actually been through yourself. A lot of the struggle and eventual depression was a part of what happened for me following this illness. And I think that's been, it sounds kind of cliche to call it a silver lining. I don't really think of it so much that way, because that to me feels like it almost like cheapens it in a way. Like, oh yeah, but there were good things about it too. But it's in a very real sense, I think, when we struggle and we realize that our struggles are a common part of the human condition, I think it really can help with compassion for ourselves and others, and for a deeper level of connection with other people.
Is it that sometimes people feel that, they shouldn't have any adversity in life, or they're not really prepared for adversity showing up that sometimes causes some issues?
Oh my goodness, that is such an insightful statement. Definitely. Yeah, I had the sense for a long time that it was, I mean, I compare it to like getting a package in the mail, and you're like, well, that's not for me. They must have the wrong address. That's how I felt. Like, no, this definitely isn't mine. Somebody screwed up, because I'm supposed to be healthy and fit and active, like I've been my whole life, and I sleep well and I'm energetic. And then all this other stuff like this, I was like, who was this guy? Who was this guy who felt old and moved around slowly and barely had energy to play with his kids or do stuff around the house? But I found, paradoxically, just great relief from suffering when I realized that suffering was something that is inherent to life. There was a passage that I read from a friend of mine, Bill Ferriolo, who's a modern day Stoic philosopher and writer. There was a passage from his book about, the essential message was, you've suffered, you will suffer, and it's a common part of being a human. It's something that we all experience. And maybe in the process, we can find a bit of gratitude for life, even with suffering. And I was like, like I just felt as I read it, I remember that night I was really struggling. And when I read that passage, I really just felt a weight lift because I was like, oh, I don't have to fight against this. I don't have to fight against the struggle, because then it's a double fight. It's like the struggles we're already having and then our fight against the struggles. It's like, all right, it's just I'm having a tough time. That's how things are. And it's no better than that. I'm not denying it. Like, okay, everything's fine now. But it wasn't any worse than that. I could take the pain. What often feels intolerable is our fight against the pain to try to make it go away. And when it doesn't, then it feels like, as you said, like, well, I shouldn't have this adversity. I shouldn't have to deal with that. But if we drop the should, then there's often something better on the other side.
Well, I appreciate you going through that and chatting with us about that. And I know it all too well. I mean, I was there, did the same thing, got the t-shirt, and I think it's a struggle for everybody. You go through life and then life happens. you're
Yeah.
you're like, okay, well, what? I thought I would be running marathons, at 60. What's going on?
Right. Yeah.
Well, in your book, you talk about the method of Think, Act, Be, which is the same name as your podcast. Why don't you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah. So Think Act Be is really a distillation of mindful cognitive behavioral therapy. Think lines up with the cognitive part, act is the behavioral component, and be, this way of being, is the mindfulness part. And I came up with that because it really, I think, boils things down to the essential elements. And I think it can be fairly easy to remember. These three simple words, and easy to remember, especially when we need it. I think it may be harder to remember. Like, wait, what was that? What's the title of that book? Mindful behavior, like cognitive. A little. It's more like academic language, but Think Act Be is the language we speak in. And so if I'm struggling with something like, wow, I'm really feeling down and overwhelmed and whatever the struggle is. If I remember, I can think, well, I've got three major tools available to me. One is think. All right, am I telling myself certain stories that aren't helping? Or am I seeing this from one perspective, but maybe a different way of seeing it would be more helpful? Or am I expecting things to turn out really badly, but maybe there's no good evidence for that? Maybe things might actually end up a lot better than I fear. So I can trigger that process. Act reminds me that I can always do things that might be helpful in the moment. Maybe I can focus on what can I do right now, even though I'm not feeling well. Maybe I don't have to make myself feel better in this moment, and I can just focus on what's the next thing in my life that needs doing. Oh, I need to put in a load of laundry. All right. My anxiety or my stress or my foul mood can come with me while I take care of what I need to do. And then the be part, the mindful part, I often will start there because it's just so foundational to our lives. The quality of our attention and how much openness we bring to each moment is really, it really colors every aspect of our experience. I compare it sometimes to it's like if you're wearing like oven mitts on your hands. That's kind of how we often go through life. There's this barrier between us and our experience, a barrier of distractions or of having our mind in a different place, or of pushing away life, like we've talked about. And mindfulness is in some ways like taking off those oven mitts, and then we're closer to our experience. We can actually feel the grain of wood on the table where our hands are resting. We can feel our foot flex as we're walking up the stairs. We're not abandoning ourselves. We're not leaving ourselves in the moment and having our minds go off somewhere else. So if we start there, come into the moment, maybe just take an easy, gentle breath in and out, and allow that to bring us back into our body in a very simple way. I'm just connecting with my body in this moment as it is. And then from there, the thoughts that I think, the actions that I do, they'll have a different quality because I've aligned with myself. My body and my mind are together, and my body and my mind are actually here in this moment.
That is such a powerful and simple way to approach that. It's not like someone needs years of education in order to reach this point. You could just think, act, be right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. Yes, I'm so happy to hear you say simple, because that is exactly what I'm aiming for. I mean, it's in the subtitle, Simple Path, but that's because I don't want it to be something esoteric or academic. And what I love about mindfulness and CBT together is they're really a way of approaching life that's been discovered over and over and over by individuals, by schools of thought, by different philosophies. You can go back 2,000 years and read the Stoics, and this is really essentially what they're talking about. Some of the passages, like from Marcus Aurelius, he was a Stoic philosopher and a Roman emperor. They capture mindful CBT perfectly, not because they were looking ahead 2,000 years to mindful CBT, but these are essential elements of living a full life. Tend to your thoughts, act with intention, and be in the present with openness to what's happening. What I also like about it, along these lines of keeping it simple, is it also lines up with a mind, body, heart approach that, or mind, body, spirit, but also heart, head, hands, and heart. So mind, body, spirit, that's mind is cognitive, body is behavioral, spirit is mindfulness. Head, hands, and heart, similar thing. Head is cognitive, hands is behavioral, and heart is mindfulness. So these, to me, it just says that it's not that I've invented something unheard of. It's just that I think, added my voice to this common human awareness of what helps us to live well.
Well, and there's so many people so interested in a mindful movement at this point in history. So adding a way where people can greater connect with themselves in a deeper way, I think is so empowering.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I love so many of the ways that you describe things, Marianne, like saying, connect with ourselves. To me, that's the essence of mindfulness, is connecting with ourselves, or sometimes I say coming home to ourselves. I think we can, words are helpful, obviously. They're how we communicate with each other and how I'm speaking with you right now. They're also limiting. Like when I say mindfulness, I think we often assume that we know what that means. And usually it's a fairly narrow description that includes probably, someone sitting and doing meditation, or, what seems to me like a pretty sterilized experience of mindfulness. We're not going to get rid of the word. I think it is useful in a way, but when I think mindfulness, what I really have in mind is not any specific practice or a certain costume you have to wear or a kind of a certain way of speaking or of being. It's just being in your life, and it's receiving your life as it is, instead of rejecting it or saying that's not for me, or I don't want that, or this is bad and I'm gonna pursue the good. It's taking a more kind of open-handed approach. So I'm not, if you imagine, your own hands, you can look at them, look at your palms open. That's the kind of the posture that I imagine with mindfulness, versus kind of clinging, where you're reaching out and trying to grab things like, oh, I want that. I want more pleasure. I want more fame. I want more wealth. And it's also not resisting, where you may be holding your hands out and pushing things away. Like, I don't want pain. I don't want embarrassment. I don't want loss. And we can live our lives in that constant struggle. Give me and get rid of that. But there's really no peace of mind in that way of approaching things. And then when we remember, like, oh, I don't have to chase or resist. I can just open to things as they are. Really, I think that's where our peace lies. And peace that I found, and so many who have walked similar paths have found, that the peace no longer depends on things working out the way you want them to, but it's something more reliable than that, something that's not so conditional.
And what would that be?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. It's a little, well, okay, I'll say what it is and then I'll say more about it. It's described in different religions or philosophical approaches, like in Christianity, which I was raised in. There are verses about a peace that passes understanding, like a peace that's beyond sort of like, yeah, doesn't really make sense that I'd feel peaceful even in these circumstances, and yet I do. Or it's being able to find contentment in any circumstance. And in Buddhism, and Stoicism and other approaches, there are very similar ideas that we no longer have to tie our peace of mind to the sort of ups and downs of our situation, because then we're really just at the mercy of what's happening. Like, do I like how things are going? Okay, great. Then I'm in a fundamental sense, I'm okay. But if I don't like how things are going, then I can't be okay, and I have to be distressed and upset and out of sorts. So it's the caveat is that I'm not saying that we become indifferent to what's going on. We don't become inhuman in our response to things, or like a piece of rock. But there is a stability, or a mountain is often used as a metaphor for this type of relationship with life, in that lots of stuff happens on the surface of a mountain. There's erosion, there are changing seasons, there's ice and wind and snow and sunshine, there are leaves that fall, or people. But all that's happening on the surface. But deeper within the rock of that mountain, there's a stability that's unchanging. In a similar way, when we go deep within ourselves, we just drop down within ourselves, there's also a level of awareness that's very analogous to that sense of stability in the mountain, that I'm not being tossed about by what's happening on the surface, that my happiness isn't contingent on whether things, whether the day gets a thumbs up or a thumbs down. There's a part of us, a part of all of us, that is untouched by our measures of loss and gain, that can witness those things without actually being affected by them or diminished by them. So we can practice connecting to that part of ourselves, and meditation is a great way to do this. But as we connect with that part of ourselves, then we can find that stability that isn't dependent on our situation or on things going the way we like them to.
I know in your book you talk about just finding rest. And I love how you talked about this boss who was just demanding.
Yeah.
Was the way that you described it. And I think a lot of times we go through our lives feeling that way, feeling like we have these demands or demanding bosses or demands, that are just present in our life. So how do we find any point of rest throughout all that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think rest is really central to so much of what we need. I like to start by recognizing what it is that's driving us. Because often it's coming that perpetual sense of doing and motion and trying to reach more and achieve more. It's driven by a sense of somehow not being enough, not being productive enough. That's big in our society. Not being smart enough, not being good enough. And so we keep going and going and going and trying to prove ourselves. And yet what we're chasing we never get there, because that's not the right. It's like we're on the wrong train. No matter how long you ride that train, it's never going to take you where you want to go if it's heading in the wrong direction. So the rest I'm talking about is noticing, oh, this frantic activity, this constant stress, this is not leading me to the peace that my mind and my heart crave. And so we start by stepping off that train. And that could happen just by kind of coming back to ourselves with, again, in a very simple way, just maybe pausing for a moment, noticing how the breath is moving in the body, feeling the body, and then allowing ourselves to be still for long enough that we sort of recollect ourselves. Like we recollect ourselves from all the ways that we've scattered ourselves, in so many directions. So then we're back with ourselves in the present. And then from there, we can ask ourselves, what do we need in this moment? Often, it might be something like a nap or, just a few moments to decompress. And that's, I think, where we can start to find our rest, is in realizing we don't have to constantly do more and prove more, but the whatever it is we're chasing, what we're really after, what we really most desire in our lives, whatever that is, whatever that truly is, it's already here. It's already in this moment. And if you say, well, no, because what I really want is $1 billion, I don't see that in this room unless it's invisible. That's why I describe it as what we really want, what we truly want, what our truest heart's craving and longing is. I think it's for a sense of home, a sense of belonging, a sense of connection. And that's right here, as often as we're able to rediscover it.
So beautifully said. Your book really, it encourages people to become inquisitive about what they're feeling. Like ask these questions, and consider how these different emotions are having an impact on your day and your life. And something as simple as that. Right? I mean, when I was in my 20s, I never asked questions. I was just kind of bobbing around,
Right.
So,
Yes.
so the ability to have this toolkit, these life skills, I think is just so empowering.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you suggested, awareness is such a huge part of it. Just that simple awareness can get us, can make such a difference.
Well, Seth, I mean, we could talk for hours. I just really appreciate not only your insights, but your book. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn a little bit more about the work you do?
Yeah, I would love that. You can connect with me at my website, sethgillihan.com, and there are links there to pretty much everything I'm involved in.
Well, thank you for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
This was great, Marianne. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Seth Gillihan. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Mindful Cognitive Behavioral Therapy: A Simple Path to Healing, Hope, and Peace. Mindful Cognitive Behavioral Therapy is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Again, if you'd like to learn more about Dr. Gillihan and what he's up to, you can at sethgillihan.com for more information. Well, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.